This activity uses a topology with a discontiguous network, 172.30.0.0. This network has been subnetted using VLSM. The 170.30.0.0 subnets are physically and logically divided by at least one other classical or major network, in this case the two serial networks 209.165.200.228/30 and 209.165.200.232/30. This can be an issue when the routing protocol used does not include enough information to distinguish the individual subnets. RIP2 is a classless routing protocol that can be used to provide subnet mask information in the routing updates. This will allow VLSM subnet information to be propagated throughout the network. Cable the network using the chart and the existing devices in the activity. Load the routers with the supplied scripts. Verify that both serial links are up. The status of the two serial links can quickly be verified using the showIP interface brief command on R2. Both serial interfaces should show status as up and protocol as up. Check the connectivity from R2 to the hosts on the R1 and R3 LANs. Check the connectivity between the PCs. View the routing table on R2. Use the showIP route command to view the routing table on R2. Both the R1 and R3 are advertising routes to the 172.30.0.0/16 network. Therefore, there are two entries for this network in the R2 routing table. The R2 routing table only shows the major classical network address of 172.30.0.0. It does not show any of the subnets for this network that are used on the LANs attached to R1 and R3 because the routing metric is the same for both entries. The router alternates the routes that are used when forwarding packets that are destined for the 172.30.0.0/16 network. Examine the routing table on R1. Use the showIP route command to view the routing table on R1. Both R1 and R3 are configured with interfaces on a discontiguous network, 172.30.0.0. The 172.30.0.0 subnets are physically and logically divided by at least one other classful or major network. In this cup, the two serial networks 209.165.200.228/32 and 209.165.200.232/30 classful routing protocols like RIP1 summarize networks at major network boundaries. Both R1 and R3 will be summarizing 172.30.0.0 subnets to 172.30.0.0. Because the route to 172.30.0.0/16 is directly connected, and because R1 does not have any specific routes for the 172.30.0.0 subnets on R3, packets destined for the R3 LANs will not be forwarded properly. Examine the routing table on R3. Use the showAtRoute command to view the routing table on R3. R3 only shows its own subnets for 172.30.0.0 network, 172.30.100/24, 172.30.110/24, 172.30.200.16/28, and 172.30.200.32/28. R3 does not have any routes for the 172.30.0.0 subnets on R1. Examine the RIP1 packets that are being received by R2. Use the debug if RIP command to display RIP routing updates. R2 is receiving the route 172.30.0.0 with one hop from both R1 and R3. Because these are equal cost metrics, both routes are added to the R2 routing table. Because RIP1 is a classful routing protocol, no subnet mask information is sent in the update. Use the version 2 command to enable RIP version 2 on each router. RIP2 messages include the subnet mask in a field in the routing updates. This allows subnets and their masks to be included in the routing updates. However, by default RIP2 summarizes networks at major network boundaries, just like RIP1, except that the subnet mask is included in the update. Verify that RIP2 is running on the routers. The debug if RIP, showAt protocols, and showRun commands can all be used to confirm that RIP2 is running. Use the version 2 command to enable RIP version 2 on each router. Use the showAtRoute command on each router. The LANs connected to R1 and R3 are still composed of discontiguous networks. R2 still shows two equal cost paths to the 172.30.0.0/16 network in the routing table. R2 still shows only the major classful network address of 172.30.0.0 and does not show any of the subnets for this network. R3 is not sending any of the 172.30.0.0 subnets, only the summarized route of 172.30.0.0/16, including the subnet mask. This is why R2 and R1 are not seeing the 172.30.0.0 subnets on R3. The No Auto Summary command is used to turn off automatic summarization in RIP2. Disable auto summarization on all routers. The routers will no longer summarize routes at major network boundaries. Use the showAtRoute commands on all three routers to view the routing tables. The LANs connected to R1 and R3 should now be included in all three routing tables. Check connectivity between R2 router and PCs.